As I stood on stage, receiving the biggest award of my life, my phone suddenly buzzed with a new clip from my parents' home camera. And on that screen, I saw myself. Another version of me, carrying a safe out onto the porch at 2:17 a.m., wearing a green cap that had never belonged to me. Between two realities, one question pounded in my head. If I'm here, then who is the person in that video? That tiny detail, the green cap with its faded, worn logo, suddenly cracked open the familiar wall of my family. I stood in the flash of cameras and applause, but my heart raced because of that fleeting clip. It wasn't just a blurry video in the night, it was a carefully staged accusation, a performance crafted so every piece of evidence pointed straight at me. And the most terrifying part was that my family already seemed prepared to believe it. From that moment, Sunday dinners at the Hart House would never be the same again. I left the hotel into the dry, high Denver night, the wind threading through the pines like someone pulling a long note on a violin. The green cap from the clip still flickered in my mind like a warning light. In the parking lot, I replayed the video in slow motion, the timestamp stamped 2:17, the yellow porch bulb, the faint creak of the door. I turned off the phone and knew Sunday at home would not be like all the others. That morning, I drove back to Aurora, past the brown shingled roof, yellow mums blooming, red brick wall. My parents' house appeared so gentle, oak door, white trim, teal welcome mat. But as soon as I stepped in, I saw the prop of a stage play, the green cap, placed neatly on the shoe rack, looking both natural and wrong. The smell of pot roast drifted from the kitchen, pulling me toward the dining table that had always been set with enough chairs and well-rehearsed lines. "You're home," my mother said, her voice even. My father sat at the head of the table, glasses sliding down his nose, his hand resting on a stack of papers. I pulled out a chair. The cap was right at eye level, green like a stain on white paper. He pushed the papers toward me. "Something happened last night." He spoke as if reading minutes from a meeting. Line 1. Grandmother's jewelry box. Line 2. Birch Street property file. At the bottom, a blank for involved party. Waiting for a signature. Below that, a clumsy imitation of mine, the Y without its loop. "Camera shows 2:17, Dad said. You carried the safe to the porch." I placed my phone on the table, screen bright with a photo of me accepting my award under flashes. I was at the hotel at that time. Mother's smile was thin. "Congratulations, sweetheart." The bubbling pot behind me was the background track to a rehearsed play. The front door burst open, heels clicking against the wood floor. Marissa walked in, her citrus perfume cutting across the room. She glanced at the cap, picked it up, and twirled it on her finger. "Let's try it for fun." It fit her disturbingly well. A memory flashed: minor league games and an old name, Kyle. We sat down. Forks and knives clinked faintly. Dad placed the papers in the middle, his finger tapping a rhythm. "Family helps family, but it has to be clear. Do you have anything to explain, Brittany?" His polite tone wrapped in velvet, but lined with steel wire. "I wasn't here last night," I said flatly. "And, before printing an inventory, did you even ask me?" Mom dabbed her napkin. "We have the video, darling." Marissa added, "Video beats words, doesn't it?" "Where did that cap come from?" I asked. "Storage," she answered. "Our storage doesn't keep baseball gear," I shot back. She shrugged. "You've been watching too many movies." Dad slid open a drawer, pulling out a pen. "Just need a signature for insurance. The longer it takes, the messier it gets." "And what story will the insurance company hear?" I asked. "Some items missing, confirmation needed," he replied. I put my fork down. In the clip, the porch light glowed yellow, yet last winter Dad had replaced it with a white LED. The door hinge had been oiled, but the video carried the old creak. "I won't sign anything today," I said slowly. "If you file a claim, include the original camera data, the bulb replacement log, the door maintenance record." The air shifted. Mother bit her lip. Dad pushed his glasses higher, holding my gaze a moment longer. Marissa spun her ring, a streak of pale blue polish chipped on her pinky. Grandma's box should be divided equally, she muttered. Divided equally doesn't mean take it first and explain later, I answered. Mother ladled more sauce, sliding the bowl toward me. I just want peace in this house, she whispered. I looked at her sun-spotted hands and understood. Sometimes peace is just a lid pressed on a boiling pot. Peace also needs truth, I said. The wind whistled through the crack of the door, water in the glass rippling. In the hallway, the grandfather clock ticked steadily. I turned to Marissa. Still in touch with Kyle? She froze. Just an old friend. An old friend who liked collecting minor league caps, right? A pebble dropped into still water, ripples spreading wide. Dad cut in. Next week I'll fix the porch, upgrade the cameras. His voice calm, but I caught the strain. Upgrade meant the old data could vanish. Before upgrading, we'll review the full footage from the past 2 weeks, I replied. And open the storage. I kept my eyes on the cap, locking a bolt into place. Mother nodded out of habit, then glanced at Dad. He neither nodded nor shook his head. Marissa leaned back, set the cap on her head like the closing of a scene, her smile tilted in smug confidence, a spinning top at the table's edge. Lunch slid by in paper-thin pleasantries. Weather, persimmons, a neighbor's side job. I mentioned my award briefly, skirting details they could twist. Dad asked about my bonus. I answered with a net figure after taxes. Marissa scrolled on her phone, screen reflecting an old group logo. I pinned those scraps in my mind, like needles in the page's edge. When plates emptied, I rose. I'll clear. Let me, Mom said. I've got it. Warm water flowed steady into the sink. My reflection blurred in the kitchen glass. Behind me, the three of them sat frozen like half-spoken thoughts. I scrubbed the last dish, dried it, and decided to start with the quiet things: bulb logs, door hinges, maintenance records, holiday storage. Back at the table, I said, "This afternoon I'll stop by church. I need to see Sister Ruth about that recent notarization." Mother stiffened slightly, then nodded. "Yes, ask her." Dad gave a faint, Marissa looked up. "Why are you doing that?" "To make things clear," I said, calm but firm. Sunlight slipped off the table. I lifted the cap from the rack, set it neatly back, returning a prop to its place before the next act. It lay there, green and silent, but no longer harmless. It was the first thread, and I had the end in my hand. I drove down an elm-lined street, fingers trembling on the wheel. All the way from Aurora back to my apartment, I replayed that clip of me carrying the safe, again and again. But this morning, the truth wasn't in the video, it was in the bank. The branch sat on Colfax Avenue, glass walls gleaming, air hushed like everything inside moved a beat slower. I stepped to the counter, laid down my card and license, voice oddly steady. "I'd like to check last week's transactions for the joint savings account under Brittany and Elaine Hart." The teller in a gray suit smiled professionally. "One moment, ma'am." She scanned the screen, then frowned. There was a check, number 1049, cashed on Friday. $12,000. Signed. Brittany L. Hart. I swallowed hard. "Please print me a copy." The page slid warm from the printer, ink still sharp. The signature looked exactly like mine, but I knew my own habits. On the Y, I always extended the tail with a small hook. Here it was bluntly cut. Someone had learned my signature well enough to fool the system. The manager, Mr. Patel, approached when he saw me standing too still. "Around 50, trim," his voice measured. "Would you like to open a dispute file? This is a joint account, but only your signature is present. We'll flag it for security and review camera footage." I nodded. Patel pulled a file, flipping to the last page. A grainy photo of the person cashing the check emerged. On the left wrist, a thin wave tattoo, the hand wearing a square-cut stone ring. I froze. Marissa had a tiny tattoo in that exact spot from her college years. Would you like us to freeze the remaining checks? Patel asked. Temporarily. And please add this photo to the dispute file. I tucked the paper into my leather folder, feeling like I'd slipped a blade inside. Outside on the stone steps, the wind whipped through my hair. Memory surged. The morning I opened the joint account so Mom could withdraw money for Grandma's hospital bills, since she was too frail to handle it herself. I thought convenience meant safety. Now that same convenience had turned against me, used as a weapon to erase my name. The phone buzzed. Whitaker's voice came through, steady as ever. Brittany, I just received a copy from the county office. You need to brace yourself. What now, Whit? Quitclaim deed, recorded last week. Your name's been removed from the Birch Street property. I leaned back against the stone pillar. Impossible. I never signed anything. I believe you. But the file shows your signature, notarized at St. Michael's Church. Red seal and all, I just reviewed it. It looks genuine. My mother's church? Yes. And with notarization, it carries legal weight. Unless you prove forgery, your rights are gone. My vision blurred. Days ago, I'd stood in Denver under applause, thinking life had turned a page. Now even the house tied to Grandma's memory was being pulled away. Send me the copy, I said. Minutes later, the email arrived. I opened it. Page 1 read, cold. Quitclaim deed Birch Street property. Grantor, Brittany L. Hart. Grantees, Gerald and Elaine Hart. At the bottom, the familiar slant of my signature. I zoomed in. The B was too rounded, something I'd never done, but who outside family would know that difference? I walked into a nearby cafe, sat at a wooden table. The grinder whirred, the air a mix of fresh roast and faint smoke. I laid out 2 sheets, the $12,000 check and the quitclaim deed. One stole money, the other stole rights. I called Whitaker back. If I prove I wasn't at the church when it was notarized, you'll need alibis. Emails, schedules, any digital footprint. But tread carefully, don't confront them head-on. Let the law lead before emotions. I exhaled. I know. But Whit, this feels awful. It's like my family rehearsed a whole play, and I'm the villain. He paused, then said, remember, Brittany papers can be forged, but truth leaves cracks. Your job is to find them. I closed the call. Noon sun spilled on the street like molten metal. I clenched the folder, knowing every step now had to leave a trace. In my mind, Birch Street reappeared, the white door, the porch where Grandma used to sit, the family photo on the living room wall. It wasn't just property, it was memory, proof I belonged. And now, on paper, I'd been erased. I scrolled through last week's emails. On the notarization day, I'd been presenting in Boulder before an investment board. I had photos, a LinkedIn update, client files timestamped 2 p.m., evidence I'd been nearly 50 miles away. I saved everything into a folder named Defense. Heavy name, but fitting. This wasn't just family anymore. It was a legal battle where ink weighed heavier than stone. By evening, back at my apartment, pale light stretched across the sofa. I laid the folder on the table, staring at the forged signature. The ink seemed to taunt. No matter how hard you try, we can still erase you. I whispered to myself, not this time. And I knew this was only the beginning. That dawn arrived earlier than usual. I had barely dozed after a night wrestling with forged papers when the phone rang, its glow sharp in the dark apartment. 6:15 a.m. A number that made my heart lurch. Nobody called at that hour, unless it was urgent. I answered. A woman's voice, raspy yet steady. Brittany? This is Mrs. Adler. Do you still remember me? Of course I remembered. Mrs. Adler had been our next-door neighbor for over 20 years. Every Christmas, she'd bring over a tin of homemade butter cookies, scented with cinnamon and vanilla. After her husband passed, she lived alone in her house with its low white fence and lavender garden. I remember, I answered, forcing my voice to stay calm. What happened? Last night I saw someone going in and out of your parents' house. Around 2 a.m. I didn't get outside in time, but my doorbell camera caught it pretty clearly. I shot upright. The curtains were still drawn, faint light slipping through the cracks. Can you send it to me? Already did. Check your messages. My phone buzzed again. I opened it. The image was grainy but clear enough. A figure in the familiar green cap, dark jacket, backpack streaked with paint. The steps were heavy, but what made me choke was the walk. The person limped, dragging the left foot slightly. I remembered my own injury at 16, the fracture in my right leg that left me with a lifelong uneven stride. I limped on the right, not the left. I replayed the video, pausing when the figure turned sideways to open the gate. At first glance, the posture looked eerily like mine, but that uneven detail betrayed the lie. A crooked seam showed beneath the fabric, a small flaw, but decisive. Are you sure it was last night? I asked. Sure. I couldn't sleep, just about to make tea when I heard noises in the yard. The person went in and out within 10 minutes, didn't carry anything big, but moved in a hurry. Did anyone else in the neighborhood see? I don't think so. The folks across the street are on vacation, and the house opposite went dark early. But my video has a timestamp, 6 minutes, 17 seconds, yesterday. I thanked her over and over, promising to stop by later. Putting the phone down, I sat in silence. Another piece had just locked into the puzzle already staged against me. The green cap showed up in the porch clip, then on the shoe rack at Sunday dinner. Now it appeared in Mrs. Adler's video. But this time, the person wearing it slipped. They couldn't mimic a limp etched into my muscles for years. I stood, pulled the curtains open. Morning light washed over the city, rooftops still damp with dew, and in that moment, I saw the truth. Someone was impersonating me systematically, from the bank to notarized papers, from the cap to the gate. But they didn't realize even the best disguise leaves seams. My phone buzzed again. Whitaker's text. Got the quitclaim file. We'll analyze further. Stay steady. I wanted to type back, but my fingers hovered. Instead of telling him everything, I only sent a screenshot of Mrs. Adler's video. One line. Important detail. We'll discuss later. The wall clock ticked steadily in the small room. I put on a coat, brewed a cup of black coffee. The bitter smell grounded me. From this moment, every small detail, a pen stroke, a stride, a cap, could be the thread to pull the truth out of the dark. Outside, the sun crept higher. A new day, but I was no longer standing on the sidelines. I was stepping into the center of a chessboard, where every move demanded clarity. And I had the first piece of evidence that couldn't be denied. The person in the video wasn't me. I drew a deep breath, sat back at the table, opened my laptop. The image from Mrs. Adler's doorbell camera glowed on the screen. Yellow porch light, angled silhouette, the green cap peeking from the brim. I knew there were still layers of curtains to pull back, one by one, until everything lay bare. I stared at the cap on my kitchen table all morning. Dawn streamed through the window, brushing over fabric faded with years. The brim frayed slightly, a seam running crooked. I flipped it inside out, the musty scent clinging, nothing like a convenience store buy. It belonged to a place, a memory, and it was the key. After receiving Mrs. Adler's clip, I couldn't sit still. This cap had appeared in both scenes, the fake video of me and Sunday dinner as a prop. Now it sat in front of me, silent but heavy. I knew I had to find its origin. I tucked it into a canvas bag, zipped it. Drove down Colfax, the street dotted with early walkers, old sporting goods shops wedged between cafes and repair garages. I remembered one store near a little theater, its faded signs still clinging. That was my first stop. The bell above the door jingled as I pushed in. Inside, the smell of worn leather, sweat-soaked gloves, and wooden bats hung in the air, taking me back to summer bleachers. Behind the counter stood an elderly man, silver beard, hair white and wild, eyes bright behind wire frames. "Morning, what can I help you find?" His voice deep and steady. I placed the green cap on the counter. "I want to know about this. Do you recognize it?" He lifted it gently, turning it as if it were an old friend. His eyes lit up after just a second. "River gulls," he breathed. I leaned in. "River gulls?" "Colorado's minor league team," he explained. "Disbanded about 7 years ago. This model was the final run, released that summer, sold only at the stadium, never in stores or online." Blood rushed in my ears. "You're certain?" He nodded. "As certain as I'm standing here. I used to work the souvenir stand at their field. See this logo?" He pointed at the blue-stitched seagull mid-flight. "Slight flaw in the last batch. Thread slanted right. You only notice if you know where to look. Collectors hunt for it, it's rare." I stared at the logo. Only someone steeped in the game would see the flaw. Who could have kept it all this time? He shrugged. "Anyone who went to the stadium then. Loyal fans, maybe players' friends. But these are scarce now, mostly in collectors' hands." I fell silent, memory rushing in. In my family, who had been at that stadium? A blurry reel, Marissa in college, hand in hand with Kyle, the backup pitcher she dated. I remembered a summer night, their laughter echoing after a game, his jersey still smelling of grass. I closed my eyes briefly. Kyle. The one who vanished after their breakup, a fight loud enough for the whole dorm, Marissa sobbing, Kyle storming off, lugging a box of baseball memorabilia I glimpsed. "Did anyone from the team ever resell these?" I asked. The man shook his head. "Hard to trace, but if you see one, it's tied to river gulls. No other way." I thanked him, zipped the cap back into my bag. Stepping outside, cold wind carried Colfax's damp morning air. Torn posters flapped against brick walls, reminding me time could blur memory but not erase roots. In the car, I set the cap on the passenger seat, staring at it like a silent witness. Every stitch tugged me back to a relationship I thought buried. Kyle was gone from my life, but his trace returned through Marissa. I opened my phone, scrolled through old albums. There it was, Marissa's 20th birthday. In the frame, Kyle wore the green cap, beer in hand, grin cocky. I'd never noticed before, but now the piece fit perfectly. My grip tightened on the wheel. The cap's path was clear, from River Gull Stadium to Kyle, then somehow into my house, turned into a tool of impersonation. What I didn't know was, who brought it back? Marissa? Or was Kyle still in the shadows, part of this play? A horn blared behind me, snapping me out of thought. I merged into traffic, questions circled. Did Marissa keep contact with Kyle? Or had she saved some of his things, now using them in this scheme? That afternoon, I met Whitaker at his office. He eyed the cap, lifted a brow. I recounted the shop owner's words. "This isn't just any cap, it's tied to a stadium long gone. And Kyle was there." Whitaker jotted notes, nodding. "This detail matters. It opens a new path. If Kyle's involved, things are messier." I sighed. I don't know if Marissa still talks to him, but the fact this cap ended up in my hands, it's no coincidence. He leaned forward, voice steady. "People slip in the small things. A cap, a gate, a signature. Be patient. The cracks will widen." I nodded, eyes on the faded green fabric under his office light. It wasn't just evidence. It was a bridge between past and present, me and Marissa, truth and the lies stitched together. Leaving his office, I clutched the bag tight. Outside, the wind pushed harder, as if urging me on. I knew the road to truth was only beginning, but this cap had opened the first door. That evening, in Whitaker's small office, files spread across the polished desk. He flipped pages, glasses slipping down his nose, voice calm. "You must stay controlled, Brittany. Don't let emotions steer you. Your family wants you rattled. The more you react, the easier they pin blame." We'll move legally, step by step, quietly. I nodded, emotions churning but hands steady on my lap. If they staged a false notarization, I need to prove it. But how? He tapped his pen against the pen, file's edge. Your mother's iPad in the kitchen, it syncs to iCloud, right? You once mentioned that. If we're lucky, appointments and notes remain. Check if the notary day matches her schedule. I exhaled. If I find it, what next? Don't think too far. First, we need a crack in their story. One crack is enough to tear down the whole curtain. That night, back at my apartment, I logged into my mother's iCloud password I knew from when she asked me to reset it. The familiar interface loaded, devices listed. I chose the kitchen iPad. Memory packed with Rose photos, recipes, random notes. I scrolled fast, reaching the calendar. The notary day glared back. Brunch, Sister Ruth, notary. I froze. The word notary sat there, plain, in her official calendar. A brunch, with notarization attached. I saved the screenshot, printed it, slid it into a separate folder. Cold crept up my spine. Why hide it? Why sign for me? I knew I had to go to St. Michael's. Next morning, dew still clung. I drove the familiar road to the gray stone spire. Bells rang, tearing through calm air. I pushed open the heavy wooden doors, pine and candle wax filling my lungs. In the administrative room beside the nave, I saw Sister Ruth thin, hair silver under her veil, eyes bright yet flickering with hesitation as she saw me. Brittany? What brings you here? I laid the printed calendar before her. I need to ask about last week's notarization. The file carries my name, but I never signed. Sister Ruth faltered, adjusting her glasses. She avoided my eyes. Your mother said you were busy. She gave me a power of attorney, said you allowed her to sign. I didn't think much. The handwriting looked familiar. There was a seal. So, I confirmed. I drew a deep breath. Do you still have that document? Yes. But the scan is a bit blurred. I can print you a copy. She opened the drawer and pulled out a stack of papers. The power of attorney clearly bore the great prof. Name Brittany L. Hart, but the ink was smudged, and the date in the corner was off by 1 day. I stared hard. That very day, I had publicly posted my meeting schedule on LinkedIn, with a photo of me presenting before the board in Boulder. It was public, everyone could see. The forger was confident, familiar with my signature, but forgot my traces existed everywhere online. I slipped the paper into my file folder, my voice shaky but firm. Thank you, sister. I need to keep this to clarify everything. Sister Ruth held my hand, regret flickering in her eyes. Your mother said it was just for convenience. I believed her. I forced a smile, tucking away my emotions. I understand, but convenience can be the doorway for wrongdoing. I have to find the truth. I left the church, stepping down the stone stairs, noon sunlight cutting across the bell tower. In my hands, the file trembled as if carrying a racing heartbeat. Sliding into my car, I placed the documents on the passenger seat, recalling Whitaker's words, just one crack. This was the first crack. I snapped a photo of the power of attorney, sent it to Whitaker with a short line. Wrong date. Blurred scan. The wait stretched until his reply came. Good. Keep it safe. This proves forgery. I set the phone down, gaze drifting toward Colfax Avenue. A slow, sharp legal plan was beginning to take shape. I wouldn't fall into shouting matches or dining table brawls. I would let papers, numbers, and tiny details like a misstated form tear their story apart. In the rearview mirror, St. Michael's receded, its dome shrinking under the wide sky. I knew more curtains waited to be lifted, but now I held the first piece of evidence, sharp as a blade carving a path. And this path, long as it might be, I would see to the end. Marissa's engagement party unfolded in the opulence of the Brown Palace. Heavy red velvet drapes hung low, golden lights spilling across sparkling crystal glasses, string music floated, laughter mingled with the rhythm of heels on polished wood. I stepped into the grand hall, sensing every gaze turned toward me not in celebration, but in scrutiny. Marissa wore a pale pink satin gown, hair neatly pinned, smiling radiantly as she held Brandon's arm. They were the leads on stage, the rest of us, extras. I quietly slipped into a seat near the back, sipping champagne, the weight inside me like stone. My hand gripped the canvas bag at my side, holding the copies of documents and notes I'd gathered over weeks. Brandon rose, raising his glass. Thank you all for joining us. Today, beyond celebrating our engagement, we want to share a difficult truth. His voice slowed, stretched as if he wanted the room to hold its breath. The lights dimmed, the massive LED screen behind them lit up, and there it was, the familiar video, an image of me hauling a safe out of my parents' porch. Dramatic music swelled, drums pounding, staged like a crime thriller. The hall buzzed. I caught whispers. Never thought Brittany would. It looks just like her. My chest tightened, but my hand stayed steady. I stood, walked straight to the front. My heels echoed against the wood, silencing the room. Don't stop it, I said, voice clear. Play it frame by frame. The technician glanced at Brandon. Marissa frowned. Brandon forced a smile. If you think it's necessary, he nodded. The frame froze. I stepped closer, pointing up. Look at the wall clock's reflection in the glass door. The minute hand sits between two marks, a position only possible before the daylight savings change, but that day in November the clocks had already been reset. This mismatch proves what? That someone spliced two different times together. Murmurs rose louder. I moved to the next frame. Now, look at the cap. River Gulls, 2018 edition. Only the June batch had a stitching flaw on the R. I verified it, but this video claims to be November. Who wears a June batch cap on a winter night? I gestured forward. The image zoomed into the porch. And lastly, the light. Sodium yellow. The city swapped those for white LEDs last spring. Who could capture this scene after the lamps were replaced? No one. This wasn't filmed in November, it's older footage. The room froze. Laughter gone, only the projector's hum remained. I looked around. Some guests covered their mouths, another nodded, realizing what had been overlooked. Brandon stood stiff, face strained. Marissa's forced smile faltered, panic clear in her eyes. She stepped back, clutching Brandon's arm. I lowered my hand, my voice calm but cutting. This isn't evidence, it's a fabrication. And whoever staged it forgot that small details, the clock hand, the stitching flaw, the streetlights speak louder than lies. The air thickened. Someone's silverware clinked against a plate. Outside, Denver's white LED streetlights spilled in, illuminating faces now shifting uneasily. I stood still, watching the slowed frames, the green cap floating like a cheap prop. What was meant to sink me had become proof of deceit. In that moment, I knew no one here would see me the same again. Turning, I stepped down from the platform, leaving the frozen frame behind, a tiny flaw big enough to unravel their story. Whispers swelled like a tide. Brandon stood under the chandelier, pale, sweat dotting his forehead. The mic shook in his hand, hissing static. Guests exchanged glances, no applause, no words, just heavy silence. I noticed Whitaker step quietly forward, shadow at my side. His slight nod told me the truth was ready to be named. Hotel security entered, followed by a young valet in uniform. He looked nervous but determined. The security manager laid a hand on his shoulder, steadying him. "Please share what you know," Whitaker said, slow and firm. The valet drew a deep breath, scanning the hall. "Last week, Brandon contacted me," he asked, "for someone to replicate a license plate. He also wanted the neighbor's camera footage edited, spliced to look like a real theft. He said it was just to cover theft insurance." Gasps erupted. Some guests covered their mouths, others shook their heads. Brandon stammered. That's not true, you misunderstood. But the valet stepped closer. I didn't misunderstand. I kept the messages, the Venmo payment. I can show them now. The room exploded. Marissa, silent until now, suddenly screamed, tears spilling. Enough. I just wanted to reclaim our family's property. If you'd given up a little, it wouldn't have come to this. Her words cut like a blade, ripping the mask apart. I faced her. Family's property? What are you talking about? My mother sobbed into her hands. My father slammed his fist down. Quiet. Not another word. But it was too late. Guests stared, catching every flicker. The room suffocated. Whitaker stepped up, voice calm but firm. Ladies and gentlemen, as you've seen, that clip doesn't reflect truth. It was staged to discredit Brittany Hart. And, more importantly, the real target wasn't that safe. He looked to me. I nodded, hands clenched. The target, I said, was the Birch Street house, the one Grandma left. They needed me discredited, so their forged quitclaim deed looked legitimate. Gasps rippled. An elderly guest whispered. So that's why it was notarized at the church. Brandon tried to recover, voice cracking. She's making this up. It's speculation, but Whitaker held up papers. Here is the blurry power of attorney they used. Wrong date. And we cross-checked with Brittany's LinkedIn. She was in Boulder that day, with photos and witnesses. The discrepancies are undeniable. Marissa broke down, sobbing. The guests' murmurs hardened into cold, condemning stares. I stood still, a wave rising inside. Not triumph, but old pain tearing open. Why had they gone this far? Why had my sister, who once held my hand on the first day of school, become the one setting traps? Golden light reflected off abandoned wine glasses. Strings still played, but the tune was now elegy. My father slumped, face flushed. My mother wept behind her hands, hiding from truth. Brandon muttered, drowned in disdain. I glanced at Whitaker. His nod said, "Their plan is cracked. Now you control the story." I drew in breath, straightened. My voice rang steady. This isn't just family drama. This is an attempt to legalize forgery. And with everyone here witnessing, there's no retreat left for those who staged it. The silence shifted. Eyes turned on Brandon and Marissa, no longer kind. A mask had fallen, leaving their bare faces exposed. Inside me, an emptiness opened, but it didn't drag me down. It reminded me this battle wasn't just beginning. It was tilting in my favor. Every small detail was lighting the path. Later, at my desk, lamplight spilling across papers, I knew a quiet legal steps was over. They had dragged me into the public eye, branded me a thief. If I stayed slow, I'd always trail behind. Whitaker called near midnight. His words were sharp. "Brittany, it's about Birch Street. Forget the safe. Focus on the house." I listened, mind sketching a path opposite of what they expected. Next morning, I walked into a downtown bank branch. No hesitation. Straight to the corporate desk. A manager in a navy suit greeted me with a professional smile. "How can I help with your loan today?" I set the file down, voice firm. "The Birch Street mortgage. I want to purchase the original note." She blinked, startled. "Sorry, you mean?" "I want to buy the entire debt, the loan's near delinquent. I have liquidity to step in as creditor, replacing the bank." She flipped through the file, scanning. "Are you related to the borrower?" "I'm their daughter, and I know this loan's been extended multiple times, rates climbing. I also know they've missed 3 recent payments. The bank doesn't want a high-risk account, right? I'll pay the remaining principal and assume creditor rights." After more than an hour, with a string of signatures, verifications, and solvency checks, everything finally took shape. I used this year's contract bonus along with vested shares to pay. When I signed the last line, I was no longer the heir struck from the papers. I became the legal creditor of that very house. I walked out of the bank, early winter wind brushing my face, but inside I felt strangely warm. For the first time, I wasn't asking for recognition, I had put myself in a position the law had to acknowledge. That afternoon, I filed a lis pendens with the county court an official notice of dispute. From that moment, the Birch Street property was frozen from any transfer. No one could sell, gift, or refinance it without going through me. Leaving the courthouse, I remembered every dinner table fight. The scolding words, "Don't embarrass your father, I just want to take back family property." As if they stood above while I remained below, just enduring. But now, the roles had reversed. That evening, I met Whitaker at his office. He looked at me, a flicker of surprise when I laid the notarized papers on his desk. "What did you do?" "I bought the loan. From now on, I'm the creditor of the house. If they abuse it, I have the right to foreclose." Whitaker chuckled softly, shaking his head. "That's truly a reverse move. Without arguing, you flipped the position, from daughter cut off the deed to the one holding the balance. They'll never see it coming." I only nodded, saying nothing more. Relief swelled inside me, yet so did unease. How would they react? The next day, I signed an order for an independent inspection of the safe shown in the clip. I wanted to end the evidence they'd built. Police were invited to witness. I stood by, heart pounding as the key turned in the lock. The lid popped open. In the silence, everyone stared at the emptiness inside. No antique jewelry, no important files. Just an old paper booklet, which when opened turned out to be a water filter warranty from 2009. A bitter smile flickered on my lips. This is the evidence they meant to use against me. The gray-haired officer glanced at me, then scribbled. "Worthless. Clearly staged." Whitaker stepped closer, resting a hand lightly on my shoulder. "See? The safe was only an excuse. They wanted focus on a hollow prop to hide the real target." I nodded, eyes fixed on the useless warranty booklet. An empty prop, yet one that almost painted me as a thief before family and friends. On the drive home, I rolled slowly along the quiet street, mind still spinning. I recalled that night at the Brown Palace, when the clip hit the LED screen, how tiny details had saved me. And now, the safe's emptiness confirmed it. Everything they built stood on falsehood. Back at my apartment, I opened my notebook, adding to the list. Birch Street note purchased. Lis pendens filed. Safe box checked empty. 3 bullet points, 3 solid steps. I gazed out the window. Denver lit up, the blue-white glow of LED lamps stretching across the boulevard. No more of the old yellow sodium light from the fake clip. That glow reminded me, once truth is switched on, nothing can hide. And I knew, my reverse move had opened a new chessboard where I was no longer reactive, but the one holding the key piece. I began combing through Brandon's financial traces like searching for a needle underwater. Electronic bills, public filings in the state business registry, even text threads I once dismissed as trivial. Pieced together, a picture emerged darker than I'd thought. In the online records, Birch Renovations LLC appeared clearly. A company formed just months ago, minimum capital, yet it had taken a hard loan using the Birch Street house. I froze, eyes glued to the guarantor line. Gerald Hart. My father. And notary introducer, Elaine Hart. My mother. My breath caught. It wasn't random. They weren't bystanders, they participated directly, letting Brandon use Grandma's house as collateral for risky debt. I printed the filings, pages trembling in my hands. In red pen, I circled Marissa Hart, account manager. My sister. The one running the Instagram account, pushing the tale of a sister stealing from family. Fake evidence, photos, mocking captions, all from her hand. I leaned back, pressing my palms to my temples. A chill ran down my spine. It wasn't just one family member astray. Father, mother, sister, and Brandon together colluded. They built a shell company, leveraged Birch Street, spun debt. They used my credibility, the paperwork I once prepared for Grandma's hospital bills, as scaffolding for trust. In the quiet office, the keyboard clicks replayed in my memory. My computer screen showed the loan figure, over $70,000, at a punishing rate. A debt never meant to be repaid, only to buy time and shift burden elsewhere. I remembered Dad asking me to sign small forms for Grandma's hospital. "You're better with papers. Help me," he'd said. I hadn't thought twice, only wanted her to have medicine. Now, those very signatures had become tools for fabricated loan files, linking me in appearance. Whitaker came that afternoon. I spread the files on the table, my hands trembling. He read in silence, stern eyes scanning. After a long pause, he looked up. "You see? This isn't family squabble anymore. This is a bad credit syndicate built from blood ties." A dry laugh escaped me. A family turned into a house-flipping enterprise. Assets, kinship, even honor, all just instruments. Whitaker nodded slowly. "This twist is the deep layer you must expose. The LLC, the loan, the guarantees, the smear campaign, each piece ties in. They thought no one would check, because who investigates their own family?" I leaned back, eyes on the ceiling. Jazz from the cafe below drifted up, blending with street noise. It felt like I was inside a play, my closest kin shedding masks one by one. Images of Marissa as a child surfaced, reading fairy tales aloud to Grandma, laughter ringing when Grandma stroked her hair. And now, she managed an account, spreading rumors I stole. I asked Whitaker, voice hoarse, "If I bring this to court, do you think they can stand it?" "No," he said plainly. "But tread carefully. A family lawsuit drags long and painfully. The key is control. You're not the victim anymore, you're the one holding cards." I closed the folder, fingers pressing its spine. Anger and sorrow tangled. I never imagined I'd see my family as a bad credit syndicate, with schemes no different from outsiders. Outside, sunset washed Denver streets in orange. My reflection stared back from the window. No longer only weary, my eyes held the spark of someone ready. Time to rip down the curtain and bear the truth. In a whisper, I reminded myself, the green cap was only the start. What they truly fear are the numbers. The county courtroom glowed under neon, atmosphere taut as a string. Wooden benches aligned neatly, footsteps echoing on cold stone like my pounding heart. I sat at the plaintiff's table, Whitaker beside me, files stacked straight. Brandon, Marissa, my parents sat opposite, avoiding eyes, faces tense beyond recognition. When the judge entered, all rose. His solemn voice filled the room. "We shall begin." Brandon's lawyer immediately requested to show the evidence again, the clip of me hauling the safe. They thought that image alone would decide it. The screen lit, the fake scene playing once more. I sat upright, eyes unblinking, fire inside me. When it paused, I rose calmly. "Your Honor, I request the metadata be compared with Ring servers and the city's daylight savings logs." Murmurs spread. The judge arched a brow. "Do you have basis?" I nodded, handing over color prints. The metadata shows 2 different timestamps spliced. And the city logs confirm sodium street lamps were replaced with LEDs before the date in their video. The scene couldn't exist. Their lawyer protested, voice shaky. The judge flipped pages, tapping his gavel pen. "Proceed," he said. I faced Brandon. "Also, I request the actual cap used." "Your Honor, I found it." Whitaker produced a clear bag holding the green cap. I drew it out, turning it slowly. This cap was sold at the River Gulls minor league stadium, dissolved 7 years ago. And most crucially, I flipped the brim, pointing at silver marker letters. "Here is a K. Kyle the man Marissa once dated." A ripple of whispers. The judge lifted his glasses, peered closely. His gavel cracked once. "Who is Kyle?" Silence froze. Marissa bowed her head, clutching her dress. No answer, heavier than confession. At that moment, Whitaker rose, handing another packet. "Your Honor, this is MLB Minor League's official confirmation. The River Gulls disbanded in 2018. The flawed R-stitch caps were June only. The defense's tape claimed November. This proves splicing. The judge skimmed, eyes steely. I've seen enough. He turned to Brandon, voice firm. The video is not evidence against Miss Hart, it is now evidence against you. I order all Birch Street transfer proceedings halted. The lis pendens filed by Miss Brittany Hart is upheld. His gavel fell. The courtroom shuddered. I breathed deep, chest bursting open. The judge met my eyes, tone softer. As new creditor, Miss Hart may direct restructuring of the debt. The court will oversee. I nodded, voice steady. Thank you, Your Honor. Across, Brandon slumped, hands trembling. Marissa sobbed quietly. My mother dabbed tears, while my father glared, stripped of authority. Whitaker leaned near, whispering, You flipped the board. They've no retreat. I glanced at the green cap on the evidence table. Small, yet heavy. From a trivial detail, their web of lies was exposed. Chairs scraped as people filed out, but inside me, silence thundered louder. A new chapter had opened not through family quarrels, but by the cold truth of law. The Birch Street living room hushed as I set the thick folder on the wooden table. No golden lights to disguise, only afternoon sun slanting through curtains, streaking walls. The space was both familiar and foreign, the place I once did homework as a child, now a meeting room for bargaining truth. I studied each face. My father's arms crossed, jaw tight holding back anger. My mother hunched, fingers knotted, lips pressed thin. Marissa stared down, avoiding me, while Brandon fussed with his tie, sweat beading. On the table, the green cap lay a silent witness. I took a deep breath and spoke, my voice steady. Today, we won't circle around anymore. I'm giving you two choices. 1. Brandon and Marissa signed to return every cent they withdrew and publicly retract the fabricated story about me. 2. If you refuse, foreclosure proceedings will begin. And as the creditor, I'll seize this house, then turn it into a shelter fund for women who've suffered financial abuse. In the room, only the ticking wall clock could be heard. My father leaned forward, about to say something, then swallowed it back. My mother's voice trembled. Brittany, don't disgrace your father. That worn-out phrase fell, sounding tired and hollow. I looked her straight in the eyes, replying slowly, Love doesn't cover deceit, Mom. For a fleeting moment, Marissa lifted her gaze, her eyes landing on the cap on the table. For the first time, I saw fear there, no longer defiance. Perhaps she, too, realized the prop she thought was evidence against me had become proof exposing everything. Brandon started to object, but Whitaker, seated quietly in the corner, tapped his pen lightly against the desk. Just that small gesture silenced Brandon. He lowered his eyes, wiping sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. I didn't press, only sat waiting. Time passed, the afternoon light shading into deep orange. At last, Marissa gave a slight nod, a surrender of sorts. Brandon slumped into his chair, vacant. I handed over the documents, their hands trembling as they signed. The Birch Street house remained, but I insisted on a small plaque hung in the hallway. The words carved deep into wood, Respecting boundaries is the foundation of every home. Each time they passed, they would remember truth cannot be buried under the guise of family. Time moved on. 6 months later, I sat in a bright Denver office. New contracts spread before me. 2 major deals had been signed, pushing the company into another phase. I dedicated part of my bonus to create an internal fund reserved for employees exploited financially by family. I knew that pain wasn't mine alone, and I didn't want anyone else to endure isolation in the dark as I once had. Life settled, though family never completely vanished from my orbit. At times, my mother texted. No reproaches, no demands, just short lines, sometimes with pictures of the rose garden she tended. I replied briefly, warmly enough, but no longer letting myself be pulled in. One afternoon, sitting in my office, I caught my reflection in the glass frame of a photo. In it was me with Grandma years ago, her hand resting on my shoulder, her smile gentle. The reflection overlapped with my present self, startling me. I closed my eyes, recalling the moment that began it all, the green cap appearing in the fake video. Such a tiny detail, yet it tore down the whole curtain of lies, opening a door for me to redraw the boundaries. Now, those boundaries weren't just promises whispered to myself. They had become a system, in work, in relationships, even in how I faced my family. And whenever someone tried to cross the line, I only had to recall that, cap, a reminder that true strength comes from knowing when to say no, from setting limits on love so it doesn't turn into chains. Perhaps what haunts me most isn't the numbers, the legal papers, or even the green cap that revealed it all, but the question: where do family boundaries end as love, and where do they begin as exploitation? Each of us, at some point, faces the moment of choice: to stay silent for the appearance of peace, or to speak up to protect ourselves. I chose the latter, and it changed everything. I want to hear your thoughts. If you were in this situation, what would you do? Do you believe true love always comes with respect for boundaries? Share your perspective in the comments below. Your story might be the encouragement someone else needs who is going through the same thing. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to follow the channel so together we can explore more stories of crossroads, wounds, and hopes within families. Because sometimes, it is those very experiences that help us find our truest strength.